webinar, How to Create Safe and Active Learning Environments. I'm Liz Bowie, Content Manager at Demco, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we get started, I just want to go through some housekeeping details, and then I'll introduce our speaker, and she can start today's presentation. So on your screens, you should see a question box on the right-hand side. If you have a question or you need technical help, please use this box to communicate with us. If we don't get to your question during the session, we'll be posting questions and answers along with the recorded webcast, presentation slides, and resources after the event. So you'll receive an email in about a week letting you know when everything is available. You'll also notice our presenters' contact information as well as mine on the screen. You can feel free to contact us directly with any questions that haven't been answered in the follow-up resources. And we're also using Twitter today with the hashtag DemcoIdeas. You should be able to see this hashtag on the side of your screen in the chat box, and we're monitoring that feed as well for questions and comments. So I believe that's all the housekeeping, so let's get started with the program. As I mentioned, I'm Liz Bowie and I'm moderating today's session, and I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today, Marcy Milius. Marcy has been working in education for 22 years. 5 years ago, she embarked on a journey to support the redesign of libraries into learning commons in the Douglas County School District. Her work has expanded into classrooms, offices, and even wide spots in hallways. In the last 3 years as a learning environment designer, she has completed more than 195 spaces to support the students of Douglas County. She has designed educational furniture for manufacturers and consulted on the design of 4 libraries in the Middle East. She has also presented at several national, state, and local conferences, sharing how active learning environments support learners. Marcy's passion is to support students, and she does that by listening to the needs of both teachers and students. So we are so excited to have Marcy with us today to talk about new ways to create active learning environments. So it looks like we're ready to get started with the program. Marcy, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I appreciate your time, and I know you all are so busy. I think we'll first start with what is an active learning environment? And here's a slide that shows the traditional space again, counter opposed to the active learning environment stage. Student in a traditional learning space, students learning is not considered, and teacher it's more led by teachers. There's no noise, and it's sort of a book warehouse where books are just stored and kept on the shelves there. In a more active learning environment, it's a more student-centered space and self-directed learning, and it has a low level of buzz. There generally is a more student-centered, and it allows for student-directed learning with the teacher actually providing the guidance in this space. The active learning environment is well-staffed to support all students because there may be many of different opportunities for student learning going on in that space. There could be a class coming in to do work in the library or the Learning Commons as a group, and they're doing some research, or there could be another group of students that are being instructed by a small group setting, or possibly even working collaboratively together. So let's talk a little bit more about how an active learning environment affects student learning. The design can actually affect progress of students' work up to 25%. 15% of the students are affected by air quality, the movement or lack of movement in the space, or odors that are given off by the furniture in the room, the carpet, paint, whatever, if there's been new design in the room. Also, it can be affected by students, let's just say, and as an example, after a PE or recess time or some other activities where the students are more active. Also, 12% of the students can be affected by the color of the room. Older students like a saturated color when they're looking out at wall color. When I mean about saturated color, I mean the color is very bright, but not distracting, but a very deep color. So the students really don't have to guess as to what color something is. They do not like the fast food colors or the primary colors. As the students get older, they don't like to see those reds, greens, blues, and yellows. Offshoots of those colors are fine, and never ever pastels. They are not. They do not like that. Um, the LED our students also 20% of the students are affected by lighting, and so many of our buildings are have fluorescent lighting, and those the flickering in that lighting, and they're not a true color. It's more of a yellowish color on the bulbs. And if buildings are built without windows, it can be very dark and off-putting for students. So we kind of gone to the transition of putting LED bulbs in, and they provide more light, a more white light, and a more truer color, and it feels more like a natural setting. Of course, natural light coming in, natural sunlight is the best option for any type of an environment for students, but we don't always have that ability. So we need to make sure that our lighting has changed. The teachers you might have seen at times take out a fluorescent bulb, or to make the lighting be able to be not so bright in a space. That's great as long as the students have enough light to be able to see. And 15% of the students are affected by the design of the space. Quite often after I have designed a space, I go back and I interview students to find out what their likes, what their dislikes are. So I'm learning after every transformation. One story is I did a classroom that was in a mobile, a building outside of the normal classroom. And the one little boy that I asked about, I said, how does the transition affect your space, affect your learning? And he said that he always had to sit by the door, and the door always had to be locked. So many times out of the day, he had to get up, open the door, and go back then to his work. So you could see how that would affect his learning. The learning was interrupted, his focus had interrupted many times, and so he needed to be refocusing his energy every time he had to get up and answer the door, let a student in. And you can imagine after large period of time how difficult that would be for him. Another girl in that same class I talked to, they had said that they liked the new transition because they're working collaboratively with other groups, and they're getting to meet other students in their class, and they're beginning to be able to make a community out of the classroom. Students are just like adults where we're going to hang around or be around or select to be around people that that we're most comfortable with. And it's students are the same, and we need to give them the opportunity to work in a separate group. And on the bottom of this slide, you can see how a link that I have, how design can impact learning and engagement in classrooms. And Demco will send out a resource page that will have all of our links that are in this in the presentation. This data was compiled by the Stafford University in the United Kingdom. They did an extensive research study about how this design can affect students. So this is just not my numbers. This is actual true research, and you can check out their information on that link when you get that page, the resource page from Demco. Student-centered active learning environment areas. Think about the various different ways areas in your library or learning commons could support your students. Think about possibly a brainstorming area or a knowledge building. We used to call this research area. How about a video or audio recording? Give those students, those non-traditional learners, an opportunity to show what they know, either with a video or audio. Small group instruction or a curation center where the students are actually curating their knowledge and curating their information that they are using to do their research and build their knowledge. With so many schools going to a BYOD or a one-to-one, a lot of our schools are needing charging centers. So it's a space for them to hang out while their device is charging. Possibly someplace for the techie kids to come in and provide support to other students in the building by providing tech knowledge that they're good with. So connecting with global learners are very important as well. These are just a few. I won't read them all to you, but those are just a few of the areas that might support student learning in a learning commons environment. So how do you start? Your first mission in this transition is to develop a vision of what you want and what your students want in an active learning environment. This is probably the hardest step of the whole process, is developing that vision. But while you're developing that vision, make sure that you're asking students, what do they want to see in the space? You might be very surprised by what the answers that they give you and by what they really have a solid vision of what they would like the space to be and how they would like the space to look. Ask your staff as well and ask them, what could you do or what could this space be to support what you're doing in the classroom? Sometimes the students and the teachers, they just need another environment to learn in, a different space to go in and learn. And if you have that opportunity for large group instruction, that's very important for to give the students that ability and the staff. Community, volunteers, administration, all of the community that surrounds your building and works with you on a daily basis, ask for their input. And then kind of gather that information and then ask yourself a couple of questions. What's my 1-year vision? That may be kind of difficult because I think probably the first question that enters most people's minds is, how am I going to pay for this? There are various different ways of doing that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And I think on the research page, the Demco will give you a link to some grants, possible grants. Their 5-year vision, that's more long-term. That's more thinking outside. What could come up? What's going to change in the next few years that I need to be reactive to or proactive to rather than reactive to? And what's the learning look like in my building? How are students learning? How will they use this space? How can I support them? And what areas can I provide that are not available in the rest of the building? So let's talk about some before and after pictures here. This is a K6 school that's in my district, and this is what it looked like before. You can see lots of books, kind of visually chaotic a little bit. There's a mural. Their books are very important, obviously, in a learning commons, and I'm not advocating for getting rid of books at all. In fact, I think we need to make sure that we have materials for students to use and have the books for tactile learners and those kinesthetic learners and those students that are possibly struggling with reading because they need the ability to flip the pages and be able to see pictures and not only electronic information. But we also need to provide some electronic databases and also ebooks as well for those types of learners that are comfortable. So generally what we're doing, what our first step is when we move into a learning commons is to look at the collection. The collection needs to be evaluated with any number of tools that you have available. But generally what our first step is to deselect or weed the collection. Remove those books that haven't been checked out for a while, the books that are in bad shape, the books that may have misinformation, the books that are in bad shape. You all know which ones those are, the reading, the drawing books, the pet books, and whatever books are very popular in your district or school. So weeding is the first step. We can't make our spaces any bigger than they already are. So the best thing is to figure out how's the best use of our space. So after we're weed, we may be able to find that we can remove some sections of shelving and make that space a little bit more open. Here's what that same library looks like a little bit later, after we have gone through and we've made the transition into a learning commons and we have weeded the collection. You can see the books are more are spread out. You can also see that we're using shelving to divide the space. What you're looking at in this picture on the left side is that part of the nonfiction and part of the everyone books, or the large, or the picture books, picture format books. So that we've opened it up, we've made it more invited. We have a large group area here that you can only partially see, and then you see the table that's back farther a little bit. A small collaborative group could also meet there. On the top here, we have some booths, and in those booths, we have put devices that students can work collaboratively together, and they can sit individually or they can work in groups on those devices. On the bottom picture there, that's actually a small Lego wall with a piece of rain gutter on the bottom, so that to kind of control the Legos, because we know those Legos will go everywhere. But we have created a small sit on the floor area for those students that are interested in working on Legos and showing what they know. It's a very interesting story about that picture. An artist came and worked with the students, and that's that picture of the horse. The school have the mascot is a Mustang, but they have developed this picture using found materials or recycled materials around the building. So if you get a close-up on that, there are bottle caps and there are pieces of plastic and all number of things. Actually, there's a Barbie in there at some point, somewhere in that horse. So a very interesting way of providing the students some buy-in to come in and see the artwork that they've created, and then allowing those tactile learners to be able to use that Lego wall and show what they know from that. You'll notice also in the picture on the left-hand side that we actually have installed casters on our shelving. We contracted with a local company that installed these casters on what was the stationary shelving unit before this, and they reinforced the bottom of the shelves, and then they installed casters. I would not recommend anyone doing this themselves or having their building engineer doing this, because you really do need to have that bottom of the shelf to support all that weight that is on that shelf and all the casters. As you can see, we really kind of opened up this space, allowing for large open areas so students don't feel so tucked in and tight. Then also we have took the mural off the wall. We have really kind of decluttered some of the areas with putting nothing on the walls. And visual noise is something that we need to pay attention to. Visual noise is just, the wall is completely covered, and that is very distracting and can be difficult for some of our learners, because it's hard for them to not be distracted when there's so much to look at. So ideally, a visual noise, we'd like to have some things on the walls, but we also want to have areas where there's just white or blank spaces on the walls for those students who can be distracted. But also as adults and as students, when we're thinking, we tend to look up and we're not really looking at anything, but if there's something there, it's distracting. And so a white space or a blank space on the wall is great to have in an environment. This building is a K through 2 school. Some former people in this building decided to paint the walls to look like the inside of a castle. And you can see they went through a great deal of work trying to make it look like an interior castle. We had some ADA issues, and so some things had to be pulled out and moved, and you can see there's areas that haven't been repainted after that. So then it was just kind of it was time to change. I was kind of sad to see the castle go, but it was time. It had been a castle for over 10 years, and the students were pretty much over it at that point. Probably the teachers were more attached to it than the students at this time. So you can see right here where I've already started to do the weeding process. We've started to move some books around. You can see some shelving that is not finished, and obviously lots of pieces and parts around to recalibrate the shelving to fit the needs of what we were doing. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And so then we have afterwards, this school's name is Mountain View, and the principal really wanted to have an outdoor theme, and they have recently adopted the ability to, they've adopted the Reggio Emilio theme, and which is all about nature and wanting to connect to nature and being really calm and really quiet. And so then we found this huge mural and put this on the wall in the library to give the students the ability to have a feeling like they were outside. This is an interior room with very tall ceilings, no windows. They did have a skylight, but it was a frosted skylight and couldn't see out at all. So this mural provided us the ability to give the appearance, at least, as we were outside. You can see the stage that we have on the floor. That's for students to kind of use it as a presentation area if they choose to. The round circle is used to simulate a campfire setting, so they can do either restorative circles, or kids can just kind of hang out and use their imaginations. You'll see some other furniture, a puzzle table, and some wobble stools are there. And then up on the upper right-hand corner, we put in a Lego wall and some galvanized metal. I like to use galvanized metal in many different situations, and it gives us the ability to use it as a stem wall, a steam wall, so that gives us a chance to be able to use magnetics, and then also for students to show again what they know, and then also it gives the students a chance to use like marble tracks to show gravity, and to experiment with those. The large gray wall underneath the mountain lion is the Lego wall. They just haven't had a chance to experience that. In the front of that is a sand table and combination sand and light table for students to get those more tactile abilities to go in and work with sand and light to be able to identify various different objects through that light. In the bottom picture, you'll see a small round circle table, and that is a science table that gives the students the ability to put things under there for magnification. That's also has a table that allows for students to do some tactile learning there. Also on that wall, you see an interactive projector. What are the components of an interactive learning environment? It supports modern literacies, it supports various instructional models, and it supports various types of learners. We'll go into those each individually here. Modern literacies, is it just reading and writing anymore? No, it's actually gone to and expanded into many different other types of literacy. Media literacy, information literacy, digital literacy, and you can go read on, and more, and found it every day. Invention literacy is one of the most recent in literacies that have been that has been put out there in the educational market, and that's more for those makerspace areas and to allow kids to show what they know. Here's kind of just a little wordle that gives you some thinking about how the different literacies combined into a modern literacy, and things that you need to look at when you're designing your space. The literacy is a large component of a library media center or learning commons, and I'll use those terms interchangeably. You'll see on the top there's social emotional. A lot of times we forget about those kinds of literacies. And a makerspace really gives the students the ability to use the makerspace as a social emotional literacy. So how might instructional models drive the space design and the collection? There are various different kinds of instructional models, and again, this is changing quite frequently. I just, as of yesterday, heard another instructional model called global literacy or global instructional model, and it is more about connecting with real-world experts outside of the learning environment, and it allows for for students to and teachers to teach in a certain way. It doesn't matter. None of these are one way is better than the other. It's just a possible way of needing to make a consideration of how you're designing your space. So some thoughts about how the design of the space might be influenced by instructional models. For instance, PBL or project-based learning or design thinking tends to make makerspace more important in a learning commons area. The ability for students to come and prototype, to do some tinkering, to do some work with making things and trying out their prototypes and testing those prototypes and redesigning those prototypes. And that goes back to that social emotional resiliency, giving students the ability to feel comfortable with failure, but learning from that failure. And then, for instance, challenge-based learning, that lends itself to more connecting with more real-world experts and going out in the world and finding people who can support their learning and can provide information for the students so they can build that empathy and learn more from the outside world. Here we need to talk about supporting all different learning types as well. There are social learners, solitary learners, and visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and verbal and logical learners. These students all may have different types of areas in the library or the learning commons that they're comfortable with. A social learner obviously does not mind being in a collaborative group and being around a lot of people. Some students, and I'm sure all of you have met one or two of these throughout your life, prefer to work alone and they're more comfortable being alone. So we do need to make sure that we provide a space in the learning commons for those types of learners. Visual learners love those visual thinking walls, the galvanized metal, the whiteboards. The galvanized metal, I should also mention, you can use that not only for magnetics, but also you can write on it with a dry erase marker, and very inexpensive and very useful in learning commons. Those auditory learners, when they're connecting with those with the outside global experts, then those students are listening to people and they're learning through that. Kinesthetic, we know about, and we understand about those. Those are the kids that have to touch everything, feel things. So verbal learners and logical learners, I'm sure you've had some experience with some other types of learning styles as well. So student safety and learning environments. This is very important. Some very well-meaning parents may say, hey, I noticed that you have a space and you need, and I have a piece of furniture that I don't really need anymore and I'd like to give it to you. There's some things that we need to consider whenever we're purchasing furniture or accepting donations. So we need to make sure that they're safe for E1 buildings. Those are typically schools. Those are zoned for schools. We also need to think about sustainability for when we're working with students, and non-reactive for allergens. Students have more and more allergies, as do adults. And if this has been in a home or a donation, or you're purchasing it from another source, it may have been in a home that has pets, and those students are allergic to those animals. So also any furniture that is purchased for an E1 building should be approved by BIFMA and ANSI, and these are government organizations that have industry standards that make furniture safe for students in an E1 building. Green Guard is also another certification process that a lot of educational furniture manufacturers will go through. And that gives them the ability to say, once it's certified, that talks about emitting gases into the classroom. I also wrote a blog a little while ago for Demco about furniture and safety tips for active learning environments. You'll be able to read that on this link as well once the resources page is sent out. The thing that you need to make sure that you do is research for local building codes in your area and also fire codes. The one thing that we need to make sure that we're being very careful about is fire codes in our buildings. So let's look over a couple of furniture items that may cause a little bit of concern for the safety of students and also the sustainability. So on the left here, you'll see educational furniture, chairs in a number of colors, and those are safe for students. These chair and table on the right, they may be safe for students, but they're not manufactured for educational purposes. They're not manufactured for the type of use that will be used in a daily basis in a classroom or a learning environment. You'll see here some bean bags, and a lot of you probably have thought, oh boy, I don't like bean bags, or I like bean bags, or whatever your feelings are. But the bean bag on the right is a more expensive beanbag because it's made with shredded foam. The beanbags on the left are made of pellets, and after a while those pellets start collapsing, and you may have spent a great deal of money on these styrofoam pellet bags, and after a year they're flat. So make sure when you're looking for materials and furniture for educational purposes that they are sustainable and they will last for quite some time. And sometimes less is more in this with bean bags and other kind of furniture. Selecting furniture that supports student learning, also we need to be very careful again about the types of pieces of furniture that we put in. The chair on the right is made with a certain type of foam that is for educational purposes. In the event that there might be a fire in the building, this foam, and this chair would catch on fire, the foam will not emit noxious odors. And that's what injures or, well, God forbid, injure a student seriously, and it's safe. The chair on the right, obviously, I picked that chair off of somebody's Craigslist, and I hear this all the time saying, teachers will tell me, oh, I got a great chair from Craigslist. Well, when I look at this, I know it doesn't have that fire safety foam in it. I'm not sure where this chair has been. I'm not sure if it's been in a house that might have had smokers or pets that might have were on that chair that could have some allergens in it. I might not be able to clean this chair as thoroughly as I would need to, and I'm not sure of what other I'll just say bodily fluids could have been placed on this chair or spilled on this chair. The chair on the left, it would have the chair. Most of the time, the furniture that I look for has an ability to be wiped down or have some kind of a disinfectant applied to the fabric or disinfected somehow. Tables. I like to use flip tables in any kind of a learning environment because it gives the ability to use that table for a number of purposes, which I will go further in a few minutes. But the table on the left is a laminate top, which means it can be wiped down, disinfected, cleaned up. It can be flipped over and to a vertical surface and then stored away. The table on the right, obviously, again, is from a Craigslist ad that I had, and although might not be anything wrong with this table and chair set, this is not made for educational purposes. Those chairs are not going to last very long because of the way that they're manufactured. They don't have a lot of support in it. And the table, we don't know where it's been. We're not sure what kind of material it's made out of. And even though it might only be $50, we have to be careful about the kind of chairs and tables we put into a classroom. The legs may come off of this, it may break. So I will go back and kind of contradict myself here a little bit. This might not be a bad table if you're starting a makerspace in a classroom, but not in a library situation. So I have a few non-negotiables when I'm designing spaces, and these are them: that everything must serve at least a dual purpose. So for instance, we talk about those flip tables that I showed in the previous slide. Those tables can be nested together so they can open up the space. So if you need to make a large space for a large number of students to come in and connect with a real world expert, or maybe possibly chat with an author. And then I can flip those tables back up and make those tables then be useful as a writing surface later on. Also, students have actually figured this out. They'll take those flip tables and flip them down so they're in a vertical surface, and everything that has a laminate surface on it can be written on with a dry erase marker, as long as it doesn't have a texture to it. And it can be wiped off with a wet wipe or another wet type of rag. So those make the dual purpose there. Also, a flip table can be used, and the students figured this out, and it's rather interesting. They'll use them to provide little barriers around their work environment. So if they're working in a collaborative group and an entire class is in there, they might flip up a couple of tables to build a small workspace for them, to keep them from being distracted from other students working in the Learning Commons. Also, my next non-negotiable is it must be the size, the furniture must fit the size of the students that are using the space, or adapt to the size of the students. For instance, possibly height adjustable tables that will work. And that's what I'm talking about with adapting to the size. One time I was working on a library. It was a K-6 library, and it was going very well, and the principal said, "Oh, I want a student-centered environment. I want to make sure that everything we make sure that this is student-centered. The students enjoy coming here, but there's one thing I need to have in the space. I have my staff meetings in here once a month for about 30 minutes, and I need to make sure that I have a conference table and I have conference table chairs in the space so we can have our staff meetings." I tried to dissuade her from doing that because that really goes away from the student-centered environment, and it doesn't really fit the needs of those K-6 kids. Sure, a kindergartner sitting in a conference table chair is rather cute, but not really too inviting for them to sit in and actually feel like that place belongs to them. The other thing that my non-negotiable is everything is mobile. I try to put casters on everything that I possibly can, with the exception of chairs in an elementary space. Caster chairs turn into chair races, and it's just a little bit too difficult to keep the kids from doing that. So I prefer to put casters on the tables. I prefer also to help that, I also use cantilever chairs. Cantilever chairs are designed to sit on top of a table, and that way the table and the chairs can be moved all at once. I like to make sure that when we're designing furniture as well, that students can move the furniture. Not saying that you have to go in early or you have to stay late to redesign the space or reset up the space because something is happening. It should be able to transition smoothly from one period to the next, and to support whatever's happening in that room. Everything also should be flexible. So again, mobile and flexible, so that it can provide maximum use and maximum support of the learning that's going on in that space. Okay. Here is some resources that I have for you, and then also, Liz, do you have a time for questions?
Yes, thanks so much, Marcy. We do have time for a couple questions from our listeners, and I just want to remind everybody that the full Q&A will be emailed to you next week if we don't get to your question today. So we have a few questions that came in while you're doing your presentation, Marcy. The first one is a kind of a question and a comment together. We have a listener wondering if you could touch on universal design considerations, such as students in wheelchairs or with low vision. She commented that the traditional library environment is not well designed for this, and that Learning Commons design presents an opportunity to make a number of changes so that all learners can be active in the space.
I think that's an excellent comment and an excellent thought when you are designing a space. As far as the wheelchair students, I like those height adjustable tables so that they can move up or down and to meet the needs of any student in a wheelchair. The younger students in wheelchairs, sometimes they'll need a lower table, sometimes they'll need a higher table, so that the table allows the flexibility of the height adjustable table, gives the ability to support them in what they need. As far as the low vision, I like to use projectors rather than monitors, meaning televisions, in learning spaces and learning commons. I can put in a interactive projector, which allows the students to interact with the projector, making sure that it's a more active learning environment and not a passive learning situation. And the projector can do a 100-inch diagonal image, the projector that I generally use, and that gives you the ability, a low vision learner, the ability to be able to see things clearer, be able to interact and really experience whatever the learning is at that time. And so that I also like to make sure that we have various different types of seating possibilities. I mentioned the cantilever chairs. I'm also a big proponent of putting wobble stools in, so those students that need to move when they're learning have the opportunity to move. Even the cantilever chairs that I was talking about earlier, most of the manufacturers, educational manufacturers anymore, are making those that the back is flexible. The students can sit on those, sit with their backs on there, and they can bounce a little bit. So providing that opportunity to move while they're learning. Also, we like to put in stand-up tables for those students who really prefer to stand while they're learning. That also meets the needs of all different types of learners with all different types of the ability to sit, stand, and makes them comfortable in their space.
Great, thank you. Next question is about electricity. Listener said, electricity is our biggest problem. What are some ways we can get more power to our space?
Oh yes, the power situation, especially with the BYOD schools and the one-to-one schools. Those are really difficult. I did mention a little bit about having a charging station in the Learning Commons, but there's a couple of companies out there that have really are really developing alternatives to having core drilling, which is drilling holes in the floor and running power to those specific drill points. And that, besides that, also is very expensive and can be very time consuming depending upon the power needs of the building as well. There's a company called Bradford that has developed a product called Juice, and it is a device that's plugged into the wall and it runs over the carpet with a very flat, minimal surface. And I think we'll have these links to Juice and this other company on the Demco resources page, but I also know that Demco has both of these products in their on their online site. So, but Juice is a very interesting product. It'll be out, I believe, next month, and it has a track that runs on the floor. people can walk on it, people can step on it, people accidentally can spill on it with liquids, and it shuts the power off immediately if there's any concerns, but it's running the power to other areas in the room. And the really nice part about the juice product is it can be picked up and moved around any configuration that you want. So you're not stuck to a hole in the floor with power right there. It makes an active learning environment and transitioning the space to be so much better for you at that point. The other company is called Connect Track. They have a similar product. Theirs, I believe, needs to be under the carpet, or the carpet may need to be removed, but you can follow more on that by checking out the Demco website, and that again is called Connect Track. Do we have any other questions, Liz?
Yeah, a couple more. Thanks so much, Marcy. Next question is probably what a lot of our listeners are wondering. Where do you get the funds to work on the projects that you're working on?
That's the biggest question I generally get. There's different ways to do the funding. You had mentioned one time, Liz, that you have got a page that talks about possible grants on Demco. So that would be one place to look at it. The second thing is we've done some unique things in our district, and so we've done the floor plan, and we've drawn up little squares on the floor plan, and we've asked families to buy a certain square, and that gives the community the option to buy a specific little square, which provides the funding for the entire project. Another opportunity that some of our schools have used is they'll have a family auction night or something that the parents can come, and I will provide some samples of the furniture that they're looking at, or we'll do a project board similar to, you'll see some design boards where they do the colors and all of what's being purchased, and parents can actually see the furniture and test the furniture and understand what they can do to really help move the library into a more learning commons situation. Those have been very successful. And let's see, what else have our schools done to help with the change to finance it? PTO sometimes will be willing to provide some funding for that. And in most cases, not all of our schools are able to complete their transformation in a single phase. We may have to do that we may have to do the transformation in many different phases. It may be identifying, after you have your vision, well, what's most important and what's going to make this change, this transformation be most successful. And a lot of times it's not the furniture, it's the first step. A lot of times it's trying to figure out what shelves can be moved or removed to be able to open up the space, and talking to the kids about this is what's happening, and then they go home and they tell their parents, oh, this is what we're going to do in our learning commons, and then the parents get excited about it, and sometimes funds will flow in that way. I hope that gives them a couple of ideas.
Great, thank you. We have another question about figuring out the layout. And before you give your advice, Marcy, I'll chime in too. The listener's wondering, what is the best way to figure out the layout? Do you have a suggestion for a program? And I'll just chime in that Demco has some wonderful people here who are interior solutions consultants who will work with a library or a school to really help look at the needs there and envision their space and provide from a 2D layout of a new space all the way up into a 3D virtual reality experience that you can see, to really step into your space through VR goggles to envision the new space. So there's a lot of great tools out there and services that Demco makes available. And then Marcy, I'm sure that you have additional advice as well.
Yes, that would be really cool to be able to step into a space and see what it looks like. I actually use an online tool called Floor Planner. It's uh, it's a free service. If you draw one picture, if you've got more floors that you need to plan or you want to do more drawings, then there is a fee for that. It allows you to drop in some furniture into the space and to design the space. Um, so that's one thing. And I believe that Scholastic has a classroom layout tool as well. And when I first started, it was really the old school type with graph paper and cutting and pasting and moving things around. So you can do it any number of ways, but the first thing is that when I'm designing is I do not add any furniture in. It's first, when we're doing a learning commons, the first thing is designing the shelving and making sure the placement of the shelving is going to work. And then it's much simpler to start then dropping in furniture. So you can see where you can place furniture and where you'll get the maximum use. And really, in a learning environment that is mobile, placement of furniture is not all that important because it's going to be moved around in many different ways. If you can't move the shelving once the books are back on it, and it's important to make sure that the shelving is placed properly first to support your vision.
Thanks, Marcy. One more question. Somebody wondering if you suggest a non-carpeted area, and I'm guessing that means somewhere within the space. Do you suggest having a non-carpeted area?
I would say it depends, really. Some of our schools have gone in and are doing a makerspace, and so they've pulled up the carpet and just used the concrete floor. Other schools, because they don't have the funds to pull up the carpet, we're just using the carpet just like it is, and then when it gets awful, then I guess we have to deal with it. But it depends on what you're going to be using it for. I can also see if you did an uncarpeted space, but it's not really necessarily made up for a maker space, or if you're not going to have messy things there, an uncarpeted space could add to the noise because of the bouncing, the concrete floor or whatever flooring surface it is. It can provide a lot of extra noise to an environment. So that would be a consideration that I would look at before I would pull up the carpet.
Okay, great, thanks. One more question about kind of messy areas, maker spaces specifically. What
Yes.
types of considerations do you have when you're planning to integrate a maker space into a learning commons?
My makerspace needs to function as a support to what's being taught in the building. Makerspaces can be anywhere from a more traditional craft area all the way up to building robotics and making robots and competing with robots. And it can be any kind of anywhere along that dynamic. And so the makerspace, when it's being designed, you really need to be thoughtful about how you're going to be using that makerspace and how you're going to be supporting that makerspace or the learning with that makerspace. So if you decided that it's really going to be a messy area, then probably you need to think about making sure that whatever furniture you're using can support that cleanup and be not damaged by the work that you're doing. Or if it's going to be robotics, you need to make sure that whatever surface that you're using or whatever furniture that you're using won't be conducting with static electricity, and making sure that it's not going to be reactive to those robots. Most of the time, I prefer a laminate surface when I'm doing a makerspace, and because that can kind of support both all the objectives in that scale of ability of what the purpose of the makerspace is. And the other thing that's probably is almost more important than what you're working on is how to store all the stuff that can be needed for a makerspace, and if that stuff needs to be locked up or how it can be organized. And also then finished or unfinished projects, where do those get stored, and how you keep that contained, I guess I should just say, because there is a lot of stuff in the makerspace.
Great, thank you, Marcy. It looks like we're running out of time for today, but we'd like to thank our presenter for sharing her insights with us all today. And we hope that everyone was able to take away some new ideas that they can implement in their own libraries. Reminder that the recording of this webcast will be available on the Demco Ideas and Inspiration website by next week, and that's at ideas.demco.com. And so you can review the presentation and share that with your colleagues. And next week, you'll also be receiving an email that will include the slides and a resource list with some of the links that Marcy touched on today in her presentation, and then the full Q&A. And you'll also be receiving a survey at the end of the webinar to let us know how we did. So if you could please take a few moments to give us your feedback and thoughts on future webinar topics, that would be wonderful. And we hope you're also able to join us for our upcoming webinar on April 4th, Promoting Meaningful Making in Your School, presented by Nicholas Provenzano, who will be sharing what it means to build a maker mindset to support your makerspace activities. And again, thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.